My name is Valerie Sloan, and I'm 35 years old. If you'd asked me a year ago to describe my life, I would have said it was steady. Not glamorous, not tragic, just solid in a way I'd earned. One late night, one careful decision, one paid-on-time bill after another. I work in operations for a mid-sized logistics company. Spreadsheets, schedules, endless problem-solving when trucks get delayed or someone misplaces an entire pallet of inventory. My apartment is a one-bedroom in the city that always smells faintly of coffee and dry erase markers. One corner of the living room is all monitors, post-it notes, and color-coded to-do lists. I know when every bill is due, what's in my savings, and exactly how many days I can live off my emergency fund if everything went sideways. I like ballast, the unexciting, reliable weight that keeps a ship from tipping over. For almost 2 years, that ballast included a person, Trent Callahan. We met through a mutual friend's game night. Miles had decided to host a weekly series. Board games, cheap snacks, rotating crowd. At the second or third one, this guy in a faded band tee sat across from me, arguing passionately about whether a strategy counted as cheating if the rulebook was vague. He had a crooked smile, an easy laugh, and a way of making small talk feel like an actual conversation. That was Trent. We bonded over terrible horror movies and obscure indie bands that only 6 people on Earth seemed to know about. After a few weeks, game night turned into coffee on Tuesdays, movie nights on Fridays, long text threads about everything from work drama to whatever weird meme was circulating that day. If there was a group hang, we usually arrived together, left together, or at least texted each other on the way home. If you'd asked me 6 months into knowing him what we were, I would have said friends. If you'd asked me a year in, after he started texting me first thing in the morning and last thing at night, after he'd sit a little too close on the couch and brush my arm when he made a point, after "you're the only person I can really talk to about this" became a weekly phrase, I would have hesitated. I didn't fall in love all at once. It happened gradually, in the spaces between ordinary moments. Inside jokes that no one else caught, the way he'd remember tiny details I'd mentioned weeks earlier, how he'd automatically set aside the corner booth at the coffee shop for us like it had our names on it. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself we were just close, that I was reading into things because I was tired and lonely and he happened to be kind. But then there were the nights when he'd talk about other women the way you talk about passing weather. I went on a date, it was fine, nothing special, and somehow still end the conversation with, "Anyway, what are you doing this weekend? We should watch something dumb and scary." He wanted my full attention, my emotional labor, my time. What he didn't want, I learned, was me. 3 weeks ago, I finally snapped the rubber band I'd been stretching inside my chest. We were at our usual coffee shop, the little place 2 blocks from my apartment where the barista knew our orders by heart. The corner booth had become ours somewhere around month 6. If someone else took it, we both felt irrationally annoyed about it, like strangers had sat at a reserved table without asking. That day, he was riffing on some drama at his office. His coworker had bungled a client presentation, his manager was passive-aggressive, the usual. I was nodding, listening, stirring my latte long after the foam had dissolved. At some point, I realized I wasn't hearing him anymore. Not really. I was watching his hands move as he talked, the way his eyes brightened when he laughed. And this thought hit me so sharply I almost flinched. If he started dating someone seriously tomorrow, I would be expected to clap. I would be expected to smile, say I was happy for him, and then sit quietly in the corner of his life while he slotted someone else into the place I'd occupied without the title. The thought made my stomach twist. "Valerie, you okay?" he asked. I set my cup down. My hands were shaking just a little. "Yeah, I just need to say something." He straightened, that loose, casual posture tightening a bit. "Okay, what's up?" My heart was pounding so loudly I could feel it in my ears. I'd rehearsed this a dozen times in my head, and it still came out clumsy. "I have feelings for you. More than friend feelings. I have for a while now." There it was, on the table between us, more exposed than my chipped nail polish or the way my voice wobbled on the last word. His face went through this whole sequence of micro-expressions. Surprise, something like concern, then something I recognized only because I'd seen it directed at stray dogs and awkward interns. Pity. "Oh, Valerie," he said softly, setting his cup down like the ceramic might shatter if he moved too fast. "I wasn't expecting that." Yeah, I tried to laugh, but it sounded strangled. I figured, can I... He rubbed a hand over his jaw. Can I think about this? Sure, I said, because what else was there to say? Take all the time you need. We finished our coffee in the kind of silence that makes every clink of a spoon feel too loud. When we hugged goodbye outside, it felt different, stiff, truncated, like we were both trying to remember where our hands were supposed to go. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, cycling through every possible outcome. Maybe he'd realize he felt the same way, but had been scared to ruin the friendship. Maybe he'd say he liked me, but wasn't ready and ask for time. Maybe he'd reject me and then do that thing where people say, I hope this doesn't change anything, as if words alone could undo reality. The next day, he called instead of texting. I was at work. I stared at his name on my phone for 3 rings, then slipped into a conference room and answered. Hey, I said, trying to sound normal. Hey. No small talk, no how's your day, just a quiet inhale. I've been thinking about what you said. Of course he had. So had I, obsessively. Valerie, he started, and my stomach dropped. Those were not the words I wanted. You're kind, you're funny, and I love spending time with you, but I don't see you as girlfriend material. I think we're better as friends. There it was. Clean, efficient, almost clinical in its delivery. The words hit like cold water, shocking and clarifying all at once. Okay, I said, because that's what you say when your heart is cracking but your pride is still trying to stand. Can I ask why? He don't know, he said, which was a lie, but a convenient one. There's just no spark. You're great, just not in that way, you know? No, I didn't know, not in a way that made sense, but I understood enough to stop asking. Got it, I said. Thanks for being honest. I really hope this doesn't make things weird between us, he added quickly. I really value our friendship. It was such a familiar script that for a second I wondered how many times he'd said it in his life. It won't make things weird. I lied, because he'd just been so honest, and someone had to keep the illusion going. I appreciate you telling me. We hung up. I stood alone in that conference room for a long time, staring at my reflection in the dark monitor on the wall. Then I went back to my desk and pretended to work for the rest of the afternoon. When I got home that evening, my phone buzzed again. A text from Trent. You're sweet, but I don't see you as girlfriend material. I think we're better as friends. It was almost word for word what he'd said on the phone, like he needed to put it in writing so there'd be no misunderstanding later. I stared at the screen for a long time. There was a version of me in some other universe who would have replied with, I understand. I'm just happy to still have you in my life. The version who would have tried to turn herself inside out to prove she was chill, reasonable, not the kind of woman who made things awkward by catching feelings. The version who would have kept showing up twice a week, taking whatever crumbs of attention he tossed her way while he dated other women and complained about them to her over coffee. I wasn't that version anymore. Something in me shifted. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. Like someone had turned on a light in a room I'd been stumbling around in for months. He didn't see me as girlfriend material. Fine, then I would stop treating him like he was boyfriend material. I typed 2 words back. Fair enough. My thumb hovered over the send button. Once I hit it, things would change. Maybe not for him. He'd still have other friends, other distractions. But for me, I hit send. The message whooshed away and a strange calm settled over me. Not relief, not devastation, just decision. From that moment on, I promised myself the terms would be different. No more dropping everything because he needed to vent. No more rearranging my schedule to fit his. No more reading good morning texts like they were love letters when they were just habit. If I wasn't girlfriend material to him, then he wasn't going to be main character material in my life. For the first time in a long time, I opened my laptop and looked at my calendar, not to find pockets of time for him, but to see what my life looked like without him at the center. A lot of evenings were suddenly free. I had no idea yet that those empty squares would be the space where everything started to change. From the morning after Trent's rejection, everything felt strangely quieter. Not peaceful, just unplugged, like the background noise I'd been tuning out for 2 years had suddenly switched off. On Tuesday at 9:12 a.m., Trent texted me like he always did. Coffee later? Same time? Usually I would have smiled, checked my calendar, rearranged my late afternoon tasks, and typed back something like, "Sure, see you there." This time, I stared at the screen for a moment, feeling nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a simple truth. I didn't owe him that ritual anymore. So I typed, "Can't today, busy." A perfectly polite sentence, perfectly accurate too. Busy moving forward. He responded with a thumbs up emoji, the kind he used when he didn't know what else to say. 2 days later, he called. "Hey," he said, "movie night tomorrow? They're screening that awful horror sequel at the Plaza." The Plaza was our theater. We'd seen the first movie there, squeezed into uncomfortable seats, sharing stale popcorn and laughing through half the scenes. But that version of us belonged to a timeline that didn't exist anymore. "I've got plans," I said. "Oh," a beat. "With who?" I didn't answer that part, just said, "Maybe another time." Sunday afternoon, he sent me a meme, something dumb about a raccoon stealing pizza. I tapped like. No comment, no playful back and forth, no "this reminded me of you" response. By the end of the week, he'd sent 3 different variations of, "Is everything okay? Did I do something? Talk to me." I responded to exactly one. "Yeah, just busy." Not a lie, just a new truth. I was busy giving myself back to myself. The following Tuesday, I actually went to the gym. It wasn't a dramatic revenge bod transformation moment. Honestly, I just needed somewhere to put the extra time and extra emotion. I took a beginner's strength training class, thinking I'd blend into the back row, sweat a little, go home feeling accomplished. Instead, halfway through deadlifts, the trainer walked by, crouched next to me, and said, "Careful, your spine's doing a weird question mark thing. Mind if I adjust?" I looked up. Tall, athletic, warm brown eyes, a slightly crooked smile that felt steady. "Sure," I said. He demonstrated, slowly, patiently, without making me feel like an idiot. When I got it right, he smiled like he actually meant it. "That's perfect. See? Stronger than you think." That was Garrett Webb. Direct, funny, someone who didn't make conversations feel like puzzles I had to decode. After class, he caught up to me near the lockers. "You did better than half the regulars on their first day." I laughed. "Pretty sure I almost dropped the bar on my foot." "But yet, you didn't. That's a win." "Then, you around later this week? I know this great place that makes terrible smoothies but fantastic nachos." I blinked. He was asking me out. Clearly, directly. No confusing subtext, no mixed signals to untangle, and for the first time in a long time, someone's interest didn't make me brace for heartbreak. "Yeah," I said, "I'm around." He grinned. "Cool, I'll text you." When I got home, I found this message from Trent. "Tuesday coffee later? I feel like things are weird. Can we talk?" I typed back. "Not avoiding, just been busy. Hope you're good." He replied instantly. "Can we grab coffee anyway? I feel like I lost my best friend." I didn't answer, not because I was angry, but because something inside me whispered, "He didn't want to be your boyfriend. He doesn't get to act like your husband now." 2 days later, Garrett texted me. "Party at a friend's this Saturday. Want to come with me?" He told me a little about his circle. Other trainers, some clients he'd stayed friends with, a few old college buddies. A fresh environment, a fresh crowd, a chance to breathe new air. "Sure," I replied, then impulsively, "Who's hosting?" He sent the address. My stomach flipped. Miles's place. My Miles, our mutual friend Miles, the one who hosted game nights, the birthplace of my entire thing with Trent. I stared at the screen for a long second. Was this a sign? A test? Fate being messy? Garrett sent a follow-up text. Too weird? We can skip. I surprised myself by typing back immediately. Not weird, let's go. Because it was time I stopped letting Trent be the gravitational center of every decision. Friday afternoon, Trent texted me, "There's a party tomorrow at Miles's. You going?" I waited 2 minutes, then typed, "Yeah, I'm going." A moment later, "Great, want to ride together like usual?" I inhaled slowly. The assumption of familiarity, the autopilot of it, scraped something in me. Actually, I'm bringing someone. The typing bubble popped up instantly. Who were you dating? Someone? When were you going to tell me? I didn't respond. Not to be dramatic, not to punish him, but because I suddenly understood something. When someone tells you you're not enough, they don't get a demand a front row seat when someone else realizes you are. Saturday came fast. Garrett picked me up at 7. He wore a simple black jacket and jeans. Nothing flashy, nothing performative, just comfortable in his own skin in a way that made me feel calmer around him. "You look great," he said when I opened the door. Not flirty, not overeager, just kind. "Thanks," I said, meaning it. As we drove, he asked, "So who exactly is this Miles guy?" "Old friend," I said carefully, "and the mutual friend who introduced me to someone I used to be close with. I'm guessing he'll be there." "Definitely." He nodded once. "Anything I should know?" "You already know the important part," I said. "I'm here with you." He smiled. "Good answer." We reached Miles's place around 8 o'clock. The house glowed with warm lights, music spilling out, chatter rolling through the air. Miles opened the door and did a double take. "Valerie," and "Hi, I'm Miles." "Garrett," he said, shaking his hand. "Thanks for having us." Miles stepped aside, still processing. "Yeah, of course, come in." Inside, almost everyone was familiar. Faces from game nights, bar outings, birthdays. And near the kitchen, Trent talking to Miles's girlfriend, Lydia, laughing at something. He saw me first. His smile appeared instantly, automatic, warm, the kind I used to live for. Then he saw Garrett standing right beside me. His expression froze, mid-smile, mid-word, like someone had paused him. I nodded politely and kept walking, Garrett's arm brushing mine in a way that felt surprisingly steadying. Inside the kitchen, I poured Garrett a drink, introduced him to people, eased into the room like I belonged there, not as Trent's sidekick, but as my own person. 10 minutes in, Lydia approached me with tight lips and raised eyebrows. "Valerie, can I talk to you alone?" Garrett squeezed my hand lightly. "You good?" "Yeah," I said. "Go mingle, I'll be right back." Lydia led me down the hall to Miles's office and closed the door. "What are you doing?" she whispered. I blanked. "Attending a party?" "You brought a date." "Yes." "It's been, 2 weeks since everything with Trent? This is fast." "Fast for whom? Me or him?" She hesitated. "He's upset." I let out a slow breath. "That's not my responsibility. He thought you two would still be close. We are still friends, just not the version of friendship he benefits from while I quietly hurt." "Valerie, come on." "No," I said softly. "For 2 years, I treated him like he mattered in every corner of my life. He made it clear he didn't feel the same. I'm allowed to adjust." She didn't have an answer. I opened the door and walked back into the noise and warmth of the party. Garrett was by the bookshelf talking to Miles, both laughing over something. He looked at me, saw whatever emotion was lingering on my face, and mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded, and something inside me settled, because for the first time in months, I felt balanced, steady, maybe even free. The strange thing about walking back into that party was how normal everything looked. Music still pulsed low through the speakers. Someone was laughing too loudly by the snack table. A group in the corner argued about movie rankings. The world stayed perfectly, infuriatingly ordinary. But something in the air had shifted. Garrett glanced up the moment I re-entered the room, the corners of his mouth lifting in a small, reassuring smile. He didn't rush toward me, didn't hover, just watched, present and steady. It made something inside me unclench. He and Miles were deep in a conversation about travel. Apparently, they'd both been to Iceland, both had nearly frozen their faces off, and both thought the midnight sun was surreal. Their voices blended with the hum of the room, grounding me. I drifted toward them just as Miles laughed. "Hey, Valerie, I was telling Garrett about that time Lydia tried to hike in sneakers through volcanic rock." "That was one time," I said, "and she still brings it up like I committed a crime." Garrett grinned. "I'm starting to see why you two get along." Before I could reply, a flicker of movement caught my eye. Trent. He stood near the hallway watching us, not glaring, not smiling, just waiting, like he assumed the moment I noticed him I'd walk over, like I still revolved around him. I didn't. Instead, I turned back to Garrett and asked him about the hike he'd done in the West Fjords. His whole face lit up, animated, alive, telling the story with his hands, and I let myself get pulled into his energy, into something simple and good. Still, I felt Trent's attention like a pressure point in the room. Every time I laughed, every time Garrett leaned close to hear something over the music, I could sense Trent tracking it. Not because he was in love with me, no, but because I was no longer orbiting him. It's amazing how people notice the absence of your devotion faster than they ever noticed its presence. About 20 minutes later, someone tapped my shoulder. Lydia. "Hey," she said with a careful smile, "can I borrow your guy for a second? Miles wants to show him the grill setup." Garrett looked at me. "You good?" "Yeah," I said. "Go, I'll be right here." As Garrett disappeared toward the backyard, I turned back toward the counter to refill my drink. "Valerie," Trent's voice, smooth, familiar, and loaded. I didn't turn toward him immediately. I finished pouring my sparkling water, set the bottle down, then finally faced him. "Hey," I said simply. His expression was unreadable, tight, but trying to look casual. "Can we talk?" I raised a brow. "Here?" He glanced around, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of an audience. "Just for a minute, outside." I breathed in through my nose. Not anxious, just tired. Tired of giving him emotional priority. "I'm in the middle of something," I said. "Valerie, come on." His voice softened. "Please." That word, it used to break me. Now it barely stirred anything. I considered it, considered the history, the patterns, the cycles, then I shook my head. "Not right now." His jaw worked. "You're avoiding me." "I'm existing," I corrected. "There's a difference." He stared at me like he didn't recognize me, like I'd grown an entirely new face in 2 weeks. "You brought a date. Already?" I crossed my arms lightly. "And?" "It's just fast." I almost laughed, but instead I said calmly, "Fast for who?" "You." He looked down, then back up. "I didn't think you'd move on like this." I paused, letting his words sit between us like a strange, uninvited guest. Move on like this, as in without his permission, without waiting for him, without orbiting him. "I wasn't waiting for you," I said quietly. "You made your position clear." "That doesn't mean—" He broke off, exhaling. "It doesn't mean I don't care." "I know you care, just not in the way I needed, and that's fine. But caring doesn't mean you get access to my life on the terms you prefer." He blinked, stunned, like it never occurred to him that the terms weren't his to dictate. Before he could respond, Garrett appeared again, brushing a bit of ash from his jacket. "There you are," he said gently. "Sorry, just Miles had me inspect a grill situation that was way above my pay grade." His eyes flicked between Trent and me. "Everything good?" "Yes," I said, and I meant it. Trent swallowed, stepped back half a pace, and forced a smile. "Nice to meet you," he said to Garrett. "You too," Garrett replied, friendly but firm. Trent wandered away slowly, reluctantly, but he went. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel pulled after him. I turned back to Garrett, who gave me a look that wasn't nosy or jealous, just curious enough to show he cared. "You sure you're okay?" he asked. "I'm okay," I said, and the words surprised me with how true they felt. "Good," he said. "Then come on. Miles claimed he has a rare board game we have to try, and the way he said it worries me." I laughed, letting him pull me gently back into the flow of the party. Through the rest of the night, I stayed near Garrett, not clinging, not flaunting, just naturally drawn to the person who made me feel seen rather than used. And every time Trent drifted near a conversation circle I was in, I didn't shrink or shift or make space for his comfort. I simply existed without apologizing for it. By the time Garrett drove me home, my chest felt lighter than it had in months. I didn't know yet that this new lightness would trigger the darkest storm of late-night messages I'd ever get from Trent. But that would come later. For now, the night ended quiet and clean. I walked into my apartment, closed the door behind me, and breathed. For the first time, it felt like air that belonged entirely to me. The messages started just after midnight. I didn't see them until the next morning, sitting at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee and a dull ache in my quads from deadlifts. My phone lit up with a wall of gray bubbles. 12:02 a.m. We need to talk. 1:14 a.m. You brought a date after everything we talked about? 1:27 a.m. I thought we were friends. 1:41 a.m. You're really just moving on like that? This is so unfair. 5:95 a.m. You made me feel like an idiot last night. Everyone kept asking me who he was and why you didn't tell me. 2:07 a.m. I thought you cared about me. 2:29 a.m. Can you at least respond? 2:33 a.m. Fine, ignore me. I can't believe you do this. 2:48 a.m. Call me when you're ready to talk like an adult. 5:01 a.m. I'm sorry if I upset you, but this is too much. Please, Valerie, just call me. I scrolled slowly, feeling something between secondhand embarrassment and a dull, tired sadness. If I'd gotten these messages 6 months earlier, I would have gone into crisis mode, drafting careful responses, trying to soothe him, twisting myself into knots to prove I wasn't the villain in his story. Now, all I felt was clarity. He was hurting because the world no longer bent around him in the way he liked. That wasn't the same thing as me hurting him on purpose. I took a sip of coffee, stared at the last message for a long moment, then typed, I do care about you as a friend, the same way you said you care about me. Nothing more. You told me I'm not girlfriend material. I'm allowed to date someone who disagrees. You rejected me. I'm moving on. That's how it works. I hovered over the send button, heard my heartbeat in my ears, then pressed it. The reply was instantaneous. But it's only been 2 weeks. That's not enough time to get over someone. I exhaled slowly. Maybe not for you, I thought, but you weren't the one who got the script. You're sweet, but not in that way. My thumbs moved before I could overthink it. Maybe not for you, but you're not the one who got rejected. You made your choice. I'm just acting accordingly. A pause this time. 10 seconds, 20. Then, I didn't reject you, I just don't feel the same way. That's different. I actually laughed at that. The gall of it, the semantic gymnastics. That is literally what rejection is, Trent, I typed. You don't get to soften it for yourself and sharpen it for me. I watched the typing bubble appear, disappear, reappear. You're doing this to hurt me, he finally wrote. You brought him to that party to get back at me. I set my cup down, feeling something stillier settle in my chest. No, I wrote. I went with Garrett because he's good company and wants to spend time with me. Your feelings about that are not my responsibility. This time there was no reply. The silence didn't feel threatening. It felt like a door gently closing. I spent that Sunday with Garrett. Brunch at a place he swore had the best pancakes in the city, a walk through the park, a lazy afternoon conversation about everything from clients who wanted miracle results without doing the work to childhood stories about scraped knees and bad haircuts. He didn't ask about the text, didn't push for a detailed breakdown of whatever that drama was last night. He just let me exist as a person, not as an explainer. That was when I realized something crucial. With Trent, I had always been on a silent audition, trying to prove I was worth choosing, worth keeping. With Garrett, there was no audition, just presence. The contrast was blinding. On Monday, my phone rang during my lunch break. Miles. I debated sending it to voicemail, then swiped to answer. Hey, I said. Hey, he replied, sounding awkward. We need to talk about Saturday. What about it? There was a pause. Then, Trent's really upset. I stabbed at my salad with a fork. I saw the midnight novel he sent me. Yeah, he said. He's saying the whole thing felt calculated, like you brought Garrett to the party just to shove it in his face. I closed my eyes briefly. I went to a mutual friend's party with someone I'm seeing. That's not calculated, that's life. I know, he said quickly. I'm not saying he's right, I'm just stuck in the middle here. You don't have to be, I said gently. You can be friends with both of us without managing his emotions for him. Miles hesitated. He thought you guys would still be, tight, like before. Before I told him I had feelings and he said I wasn't girlfriend material, I clarified. Before, he expected me to repackage myself as an emotional support system with no romantic expectations. Valerie, Miles said, serious question. When someone rejects you, how long are you supposed to sit on the shelf and wait? What's the acceptable minimum for moving on that doesn't hurt the other person's pride? I don't know. Longer than 2 weeks, he said weakly. Says who? The committee of people who got to say no but still want all the perks. I let out a breath. He made it clear he doesn't want me that way. Why would I keep living like he might change his mind if I'm patient enough? Miles was quiet for a long moment. He finally said, I get it. I do. I just also feel bad for him. Don't, I said. He made a choice. Choices come with consequences. One of those consequences is that he doesn't get priority access to me anymore. So you're just done with the friendship? Miles asked. I thought about that. No, I said slowly. I'm done being the kind of friend who gives him all the emotional benefits of a relationship with none of the commitment. Group hangs? Fine. Occasional texts? Fine. But the constant one-on-one coffee dates, the late-night vent sessions, the you're my person but I don't want to date you routine, that's over. That sounds kind of harsh, he said. Being kind to someone who rejected me at my own expense would be harsh. To me. He didn't argue. We hung up with some vague promise about seeing each other soon, but I knew something had shifted there too. I wasn't just stepping back from Trent, I was stepping back from the entire ecosystem that had quietly taught me my needs were negotiable as long as I made things easy for everyone else. 2 weeks after the party, I walked into the coffee shop. Our coffee shop, the one with the corner booth that had been ours long before it was mine. I told myself the place didn't belong to him, that I wasn't going to give up an entire location just because he might be there. So, when Garrett suggested grabbing a drink after my workout, and this cafe was the closest spot, I said yes. We pushed open the door. The bell chimed, and I saw him immediately. Trent, in the corner booth. His booth, now, I guessed. His face did that same frozen thing as at the party, smile halfway formed, expression caught between surprise and something sharper. Garrett leaned slightly closer, voice low. Is that him? Yeah, I said. Want to go somewhere else? He studied my face. Do you want to? I looked at the counter, at the familiar barista, at the tables that had held so many hours of my life. No, I decided. I come here all the time. I'm not avoiding places because he might exist. Then we stay, Garrett said simply. We ordered. We sat at a table halfway across the room, not our old booth. I could feel Trent's gaze like a draft, but I kept my focus on Garrett as he told me about a client who wanted visible abs in 3 weeks while refusing to drink water. You'd be amazed how many people think complaining is cardio, he said, making me laugh loud enough that the barista smiled at us. About 20 minutes in, a shadow fell over our table. Valerie? Trent said. I looked up. Can we talk outside? He asked. His voice was tight, jaw set like he'd rehearsed this. Garrett glanced between us, then touched my arm lightly. I'll be here, he murmured. Take whatever time you need. I followed Trent out onto the sidewalk. The air was crisp, the kind of cool that made every sound feel louder. He walked a few steps away from the door, then turned back to me. Is this really how it's going to be? He demanded. I folded my arms loosely. How? What's going to be? You dating some guy and acting like our friendship never existed. Our friendship exists, I said. It just looks different now. Different how? His voice climbed. We never talk, you barely respond to my texts, you ignore me at parties, you wouldn't even come outside to talk to me at Miles until I practically begged. I respond to your texts, I said calmly, just not immediately. And I don't ignore you, I just don't prioritize you anymore. Why not? He asked, genuinely baffled. The question was so absurd I almost laughed. Because you made it clear I wasn't a priority to you, I said. You wanted me as a backup singer, not a main character. I adjusted. That's not fair, he said. I told you I wanted to stay friends, right? I nodded. Friends, which means we're equals, which means I am not required to drop everything for you, which means you don't get to be angry when I spend my time with someone who actually wants to be with me. Garrett doesn't know you like I do, he insisted. I've been there for you for 2 years. I tilted my head. You've been there when it suited you, I said quietly, when you needed attention, validation, company, and I showed up every time. But the second I asked for more, you shut the door and asked me to be grateful the hallway was still open. His eyes flashed. You're twisting this. I'm clarifying it. He swallowed, and I watched his throat move. This is so unfair, he said, voice breaking slightly. I didn't do anything wrong. I was honest with you about my feelings. You were, I agreed, and I'm being honest about mine now. I held his gaze steady. You're not boyfriend material either, I said. Not for me. You're friend material, the kind of friend I run into at group events and make polite small talk with, not the kind I build my emotional life around. You're being cruel. No, I said softly. I'm being proportional. You told me I'm not enough for the role I wanted in your life. I'm telling you you're not enough for the role you got used to having in mine. He stared at me, eyes shining. I didn't know it would hurt this much to lose you, he whispered. I believed him. That was the sad part. He truly hadn't thought this far ahead. Maybe you should have thought about that before you asked me to swallow my feelings so you could keep comfortable. So this is punishment? He shot back. You're punishing me for not being in love with me. No, I said. This is me moving on. There's a difference. Punishment would be staying close, pretending I'm fine and secretly hoping you're miserable. Moving on is creating space where your choices don't dictate my life anymore. He shook his head slowly. You're not the person I thought you were. Neither are you, I said quietly. I used to think you'd want me to choose myself. Turns out you just wanted me to choose you, no matter what you chose. For a moment, we just stood there in the thin, cool light outside the cafe. Then I stepped back. I need to go, I said. My boyfriend is waiting. The word felt deliberate in my mouth. Boyfriend, not guy I'm seeing, friend from the gym. The look on his face told me he heard the difference. Without waiting for his response, I turned and walked back inside. Garrett looked up from his phone as I sat down. He didn't ask for a debrief, didn't crane his neck to see where Trent had gone. Everything okay? He asked.
Yeah, I said, and for the first time, the word didn't feel like something I was trying to convince myself of. It simply felt true. 2 months. That's how long it had been since the party, since the night everything in my life quietly rearranged itself into a version I didn't know I was allowed to want. In that time, Garrett and I didn't rush anything. We didn't slap labels on ourselves or pretend we were some whirlwind romance. We were steady, slow, intentional, the way good things grow when no one's forcing them. He introduced me to his friends, an eclectic mix of trainers, nutritionists, and a guy named Brock who sold refurbished bicycles and swore cycling was the cure to existential dread. I introduced Garrett to mine, excluding the game night group, not out of resentment, just because I didn't feel like explaining why I no longer showed up to the corner booth with Trent trailing behind me. The parts of my life that used to revolve around Trent had become quiet, unused rooms in a house I'd outgrown, and I didn't miss them. One Saturday morning, I was sitting at Garrett's kitchen counter sipping coffee from a mug shaped like a dumbbell, of course, when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then turned the screen face down. I raised an eyebrow. That looked intentional. He sighed, one of those long, resigned exhales that carried more history than he clearly wanted to unpack at 9 a.m. It's my ex, he admitted. Rosalind. I paused, mug halfway to my mouth. The one who texted you during our second date? He winced. Yeah, she has a tendency to reappear at inconvenient times. Everything okay? He nodded. Yeah, she just heard through mutual friends that I'm seeing someone. Me? He smiled softly. You. There was no tension in the room, no defensiveness, no guilt, just information shared freely. What does she want? I asked. He shrugged. Honestly, I don't think even she knows. The door's been closed for a long time, but she tends to knock whenever she sees a light on the other side. I nodded slowly, absorbing that, because I understood it too well. Some people don't want you, they just want to know you still want them. Do you need to talk to her? I asked. No, he said immediately. I already did, told her clearly that I'm happy and moving forward, and that I'm with someone who actually matches my life. His eyes met mine. He didn't mean that as pressure, just truth. I'm not worried, I said honestly. His shoulders loosened. Good, because unlike with Trent, I didn't feel like I was competing for scraps of clarity or affection. With Garrett, everything existed at face value. No decoding, no guessing, just presence. A week later, while I was meal prepping quinoa bowls for the week, my phone buzzed with a message from Miles. Hey, you got a minute? I wiped my hands on a towel and called him. He didn't even say hello. I talked to Trent, he blurted. I closed my eyes. Miles? No, listen, he said quickly. He's been weird lately. I guess he saw something on social media and asked Lydia if you're still mad at him. I'm not mad, I said calmly. I moved on. That's what I told him, and he said, and I quote, somehow that feels worse. I paused, leaning against my counter. Of course it did. There's a particular sting in realizing someone is truly, fully over you, especially if you took for granted that they'd always be waiting in the wings. He thought you'd cave eventually, Miles added quietly. I know, that was the problem. What do you want me to tell him? I asked. Nothing, I said. I don't need him to understand. I just need space. Miles sighed. I feel like I lost both of you. You didn't, but I knew the dynamics had shifted. People adapt or they don't. I wasn't holding my breath. 2 days later, my phone buzzed again. A single message from Trent. Short, polished, emotionally sanitized, like something he'd practiced in the Notes app. I saw you're seeing someone. I hope you're happy. No accusation, no guilt trip, no late-night spiral. Just a sentence that carried all the resignation he would never admit aloud. I read it twice, then set my phone down on the table because there was nothing left to say. I had said the last necessary words outside that coffee shop. Everything after that belonged to silence.
Sometimes people ask whether I regret how things unfolded. Should I have been gentler, more patient, more loyal to the history we shared? But here's the truth. Being kind to someone who rejected me would have been cruel to myself. I spent 2 years giving Trent the version of me that tried her hardest to be enough. I gave him softness he didn't earn and devotion he didn't reciprocate. When I stopped, he didn't lose a love he never wanted. He lost a comfort he never appreciated. And that isn't the same thing. Not at all. Weeks later, Garrett and I were walking through the farmer's market on a Sunday morning, a new tradition that fit us in a way old routines never had. He picked up a bunch of fresh basil and said, "We should make pasta tonight." "Homemade?" I teased. "I'll need the dough," he said, nudging me with his shoulder. "You can be my moral support." Deal. It was simple. It was quiet. It was easy. We stopped at a stand selling handmade candles, then a stall with sunflowers, so bright they looked unreal. Garrett insisted on buying some from my kitchen window. As we walked, hand brushing hand, I realized something. This wasn't a rebound. This wasn't a distraction. This wasn't revenge. This was a life where I wasn't a placeholder. I wasn't an almost. I wasn't an emotional convenience. I was someone's first choice, and more importantly, I was my first choice. Later that evening, while slicing tomatoes, I thought about something Trent had said during our last confrontation. "You're not the person I thought you were." Good, I thought. Now.
because the person he thought I was someone who lived her life waiting for his approval. That version of me doesn't exist anymore, and the new one, she doesn't wait for anyone. That night, as Garrett stirred the sauce and hummed under his breath, I felt a deep, steady sense of peace. Not the fragile kind you guard desperately, the grounded kind you build intentionally. Whatever came next, labels, commitments, the future, I knew one thing. I chose myself first. Everything else was a bonus.